Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We'll start in about a minute. I see that there's people still joining the webinar, so we'll give it about a minute, and we'll get started. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm Dr. Sydia Martinez, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Student Equity and Success, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar titled Engaging and Supporting the Community College Working Majority. But before we get started, I just want to remind you that everyone does have access to live captioning. You just have to click on the closed caption icon. And then lastly, you can engage with us by using the Q&A chat box, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible during the live session. Next slide, please. So this is what our time together looks like today. It will include a formal introduction and context setting by our Executive Vice Chancellor, Dr. Lisette Navarrete. She will be followed by Dr. Lori Flad, Director at Achieving the Dream, who will help us understand who are the overlooked working majority in our system and how to better support them. I'm also pleased to have Natalie Wagner, Director of Fiscal Standards at the Chancellor's Office, joining Dr. Navarrete to share the exploration of course scheduling part-time students, barriers to full-time access, and other possibilities to consider as we continue to explore how to adequately support the working majority. And then lastly, we will have closing remarks by our Executive Vice Chancellor, Dr. Navarrete. Next slide, please. So just a friendly reminder that our May webinar will take place on May 18th. So please invite your colleagues to continue to join us. We will hear from Vice Chancellors Ruan O'Shaughnessy and Dr. Valerie Lundy-Wagner and the amazing panel that they're putting together to discuss how to create student support ecosystem. So I hope that, again, you will join us next month. And now, without further ado, I want to turn it over to Dr. Navarrete.
Thank you, Dr. Sydia Martinez, and thank you for allowing us to be part of this great webinar series that is really looking at one of the key goals and visions that we collectively have within the Vision for Success. And for those of you that are doing the hard work on the ground, helping us recover from this pandemic, you know well that the Vision for Success is to the point, making sure that students from all backgrounds succeed and that we are ultimately achieving helping them eliminate achievement gaps, both for their families and for their communities. And so this work is so critical right now as we think about a topic that comes up in almost every meeting that we're in, is how do we re-engage our students that may have stopped out or are hesitant to come back. We know that educational value still exists. We see that in the economics returns that we see that in some of the social challenges that we're seeing on our streets, in our communities, and throughout. So what is our role and what tools do we have that we can look to in this realm? So let me start by talking about a population that I'm very passionate about and had the opportunity of joining many focus groups last year and led various conversations with students, wanting to understand what they were facing and some of their struggles as students. And one student's comment really resonated, and it was, for sure, they know that we're working, but I don't know if they care. And so I want to pose to you that a population of current and prospective students that is too large and too diverse to ignore is the working learners at our California community colleges. Why? Because we are the most affordable and only open access institution across our great state. And so this is the population that if they're looking for affordability, we are the place that they can turn to, but are we ready for them and are we serving them adequately? And if you're also thinking about this in the context of enrollment declines and re-engaging students and reaffirming the value of education, I want to point out the great research done by California Competes that looks at adults. And they specifically point our attention to the 6.8 million high school graduates with no college. But better yet, I want to focus your attention on the 3.5 million with some college and no degree. These are individuals that at some point entrusted us with their hopes and dreams for a college education. At some point, they may have stepped foot on a campus, whether it was a community college, a CSU, UC, a nonprofit or for-profit. They saw themselves as college students, but somehow something led to them stopping out. And I want us to together today in this hour that we have to explore why that may have been and how we bring them back. So who are the overlooked working majority that we reference in our title? Let me share more. Let me paint a profile of these students and the great opportunity that we have to connect with them. 61% plus, and I'll explain the plus, of community college students in California are working. Nationally, 39% of students, according to CCCR, are working full-time. And why the plus? The data that we have available from the Economic Development Department means that we don't have information on undocumented students that may be working. So we know that although this number is large, 61% of our students, it's probably even larger, meaning that well over a majority of our students are working. Why does it matter? It matters because 64% of them, according to a California Student Aid Commission report and survey of all students, indicated that 64% of them see balancing school and work as their obstacle to success. And so that resonates because if we know that there's something that most of our students are struggling with, we should question it. We should explore why, what can we do? And students themselves are telling us that it's the balancing of school and work that's very difficult for them. And so while we know that adults are part of our comprehensive mission at community colleges, we must be honest with ourselves that we haven't intentionally designed all of our programs for them. There are some bright spots across our system, but we know that that changes as our economy and life structures become more complex and complicated. And so what are we doing to intentionally design around adults, working adults' schedules, career goals, and life demands? And I want to urge us, plead us to stop using the non-traditional label. As my good colleague, Natalie Wagner said, it's like calling them abnormal. The very label of non-traditional suggests that students, that college is not structured or intended to serve this population of current and potential students. And so instead, we want to look at other more welcoming terms and remind us about the opportunity ahead. Again, I'll remind us of the great research of California Competes that tell us that nearly 4 million Californians, some college, no degree. But if you delve deeper into that very data point, we know from those statistics that 63% of individuals with some college and no degree are women with children. And so this is a call to action for us. And here's a quote from another student that I got to speak to. I used to say that I was non-traditional, but now it's really, I am the traditional student. It's the students coming right out of high school that are non-traditional because there's so many of us coming back into the system. So let's spend some time defining what a working adult student is. It's individuals that are 25 and older. Why? Because that's the age that under financial aid categorization, they're considered independent. Under FAFSA or Cal Grants, individuals 25 and older are considered independent. Apologies. And then we looked at hours worked, 20 hours or more per week. And then as one way of defining and having a shared language around working adult students. How do we define post-traditional as another way of eradicating the non-traditional label from our vocabulary to ones that begin to be more welcoming to our students? One that is suggested by the Post-Secondary National Policy Institute is post-traditional, that really looks at various student characteristics, including delayed enrollment, part-time enrollment, full-time enrollment while also full-time employment while also working, and then, as I mentioned earlier, being financially independent. So we also want to think about what kinds of classes our working adults are taking. And across the system, we have this long-held notion that our adult students are primarily going to non-credit and CTE courses. And they're going to those courses, but they're also going to a lot of credit courses. If you look at just of adult learner population, over 50% are going to credit courses. And then within just working learners, 25 and older, working 20 hours or more per week, we have nearly 500,000 of our students that are in credit classes. That means that when we look at the working characteristic, we need to also pay attention to our credit classes as well and what we can do to support their needs and their complex schedules and external demands. Let's delve deeper into an element that we'll explore more in the later part of this webinar, where we start thinking about what are some of the barriers. Why does this balance of school and work, why is it so difficult? Why are completion rates for our working learners lagging? And if we just look at enrollment intensity, we find some answers. Working adult learners who work long hours complete on average 1.7 fewer units per term. So 1.7 units per term on its own may not sound like a lot, but when you add it all up, it would take an adult learner who works more than half time 2 additional terms to complete a 60-unit degree. And that assumes that they maintain their enrollment, that they didn't have to go into remedial courses, that they took the same types of classes the entire time. And again, this is based on data from 1920 and 2021. And so 2 additional terms for an adult learner includes and could mean opportunity costs. It means another year of delay in having employment that can lead to socioeconomic advantages. It means additional delays in meeting some of the basic needs of themselves or their family or anybody that they consider a dependent. So this is an area that we were very interested in exploring. How do we include that? How do we maximize unit attainment for our students, and thinking about their long-term opportunity costs, the more that they spend with us and less time in the career field of their choice. And so we'll delve deeper, explore some options, and explore additional work that we have to do ahead. So overall key findings in some of this work includes that a majority of our students, again, over 61%, to summarize all of these points, over 61% of our students are juggling school and work. So I want to use this time to challenge you to go back and look at your data and think, find out how many of your students are working part-time or more than part-time. What does that tell you? Have you delved into this? Have you had discussions locally about this population of students? We also know from data that we've looked at from the past 2 years that the vast majority, 83% of working adult learners are employed half-time or more. So if they are working, they're working a lot. And again, looking at just our non-credit and career ed programs misses a majority of our students who are in credit programs. And so looking at all of our offerings through the lens of how do we help this large population of students connect with our classes, with our programs, and find themselves being able to manage these complex schedules. And we didn't go into data on this, but I urge you to look at your local data on the last point here, which is what are our success rates for adult learners or working learners? And currently from 1920 and 2021 data, only 8% of adult learners transfer within 4 years, and only 4% of adult learners transfer or earn a degree within 4 years. So these are data points that are disheartening, but we know we can do better with more attention on this population that is a majority of those that we serve. So, now I want to delve into how are we welcoming this large majority population? How welcoming are we to our working learners? So I want to walk through a working learner receptivity and delve into a couple of some research that shows that creating receptive environments, welcoming environments for our working learners matters. And it sometimes matters in ways that we may be not looking at or not giving enough attention to. So let's start with websites, something we, as all organizations, colleges, all have in common. And it's something that more people are turning to, especially during the pandemic. So for some college students, websites are the primary source of advice, where they seek, the first place they go to find answers. And misconceptions that they find on there, whether in visual images or written language, can lead to inequitable access. There's also research that emphasizes that prospective students will use websites for information-seeking behavior, all things that you can imagine. And this same research emphasizes that in a time where many campuses turn to virtual or distance learning, the college website became the welcome center for a campus. And it has been the place that students or prospective students go to decide whether they're going to enroll or not. So as small as it may seem, they are a prominent role in how we communicate our welcomeness, our receptivity to adult learners. So we have the working learner receptivity scale, something that I want to highlight based on research that I've done. And we look at optimal learning, optimal working learner receptivity, high working learner receptivity, medium working learner receptivity, and low working learner receptivity, where colleges want to be at the optimal working learner receptivity. That means that when a student goes on to their website, your college website or district website, they see information that answers questions that they went to the website to have addressed, such as what's my time commitment? When do I start? They see images of working learners or adults, not just students right out of high school. They see a diverse array of students that are reflective of that mission, that indicate that, yes, this is a place for you. You find answers when you type in search, things like short-term courses, programs, something that indicates what the clear path is from point A to point B, from enrollment to supports along the way to ultimate success in whatever career or educational goal they are approaching your site to explore. And there's, again, a sliding scale within this. With low working learner receptivity, it means that they really can't find answers. They can't find information. And if they do, it takes them a long time to find it. Lots of clicking, lots of reading heavy text. It isn't guided in a way that is easy to navigate, or thinks about some of the answers that they're looking for in order to decide whether to enroll or engage or persist. So all key pieces that I want us to think about for this next activity. So it is unusual for a webinar to give you a 1-minute task, but we want to do that. We're going to set a timer, and I want you to pull out your phone or open a new tab on your page or your browser. So go ahead and do that. Pull out your phone, open a new tab, and visit a website for one of our California community colleges. It could be your own, it could be your secret competitor college, it could be a college that you've always admired. Pick a website, any website. The easiest one to type, you name it. And then I want you to go on there and explore that website as if you were a prospective student, one that is working 30 hours or more per week. So once you do that, I'm going to give you a minute starting now. All right, I'm going to welcome you back. So based on your activity, your 1-minute activity, where would you place the website that you visited on the working learner receptivity scale, and why? So you can either share what you learned in Q&A or just reflect on it independently. Where would you place this college? Did you find answers that you need? If you were enrolling or considering enrolling, did you find the start date? Did you find the total cost to attend? Did you find a program that leads you from point A to point B and the classes that you would need? Did you see images of adults reflected on there? And if you did, what can you learn that you can take back? What did they do well? What are some areas of improvement? And then the question you may also be wondering is, why only a minute? Well, we live in an era of instant gratification, and the reality is that many of the students that we are trying to reach may only have a minute between work, on a break, between children, or other important responsibilities to explore, to dream with us about what it means to go back to college. And if we don't engage them in that time, we may lose them and lose them for good. And while you may not like this next slide, it is important for us to understand our competition. I rarely watch TV, but when I do, every other ad is around some of these organizations. And when you go on their site, within 1 to 2 clicks, you often find things like, here's an overview of what you need. You find terms like flexible. You find when you start, the total costs, hybrid, online, in person, you get answers to those. Some even highlight the exceptional flexibility and say things like 24/7 classes, start whenever you want, or they tell you the cost up front, when the next classes start, and the months it'll take you to complete. I'm not saying we have to mimic all of these things, but it's important for us to understand how easy it is for students, prospective students, to find this very information on some of our competitors that we may not consider to be quality, but how complex it is to find them on our own sites, and challenge us to think about engaging students as we design these interfaces in a way that is easier for students to navigate. So what are some of the cross-cutting themes before we move to our next section? The one piece that we've learned from many students, particularly adult learners, working learners, is that work is a necessity. They need it for basic survival. And so rather than seeing it as something unfortunate, it's our chance to see it as a characteristic that we work with, that we embrace, and that we plan around. And that the more we can be flexible, the more we can design campuses, experiences that are fitting for our students. And then the notion that work is a necessity is especially salient for low income, first generation students, and particularly students of color that don't have the privilege of stopping out for a few years while they, stopping work while they complete an education. They may not have the support structure to be there for them. And so again, urge us to think about how do we support students when work is a non-negotiable in their life and in their mind. The other, again, is emphasizing that time is non-negotiable, that students don't have an abundance of time to explore, and that poor guidance can add complications to their students, adds time that they may not have to not be earning money to put food on the table and a roof over their heads. And we have opportunities through our policies, through our practices, to be more adaptive to students that have these challenging schedules. One of them we saw a lot through the pandemic, where colleges were putting support services on their sites or in other formats and modalities that were available beyond the traditional framework of 8 to 5. They were available in evenings and weekends to answer some of the questions. They had Zoom sessions, Zoom counseling, support services, food banks, again, non-traditional hours, so that students from all backgrounds could access these supports. And so I want to kind of lead us to another quote that a student from a coastal college in California shared, which was, as I see it, that schedule that they put up, it's good for people who don't work long hours. For somebody who comes home at 6 or 7, you've missed everything already. So I urge us to think about, talk to our students, what can we learn about their needs and their demands. With that, I want to highlight, we will have our guest joining from Achieving the Dream that will talk about the role of shortened academic terms in supporting working and adult learners. But before we turn to her, I want to turn it to my colleague, Natalie Wagner, who will walk us through something that we called an exploration of our options to better support students like the ones we've talked about through flexible schedules, and to understand what barriers exist and create a list of roles that we need to play in revising those. With that, a welcome Director of Fiscal Standards, Natalie Wagner.
Thank you, Lizette. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this work that we've been doing over the last couple of months that we have been referring to as Operation Full-Time Flexible. I don't know if this name is going to be like the official title, but I think Lizette came up with it and it's kind of stuck, so we are sticking with it for now. It's not a new initiative or a new program, but rather kind of an idea or an opportunity that we want to make colleges aware of if they're not already offering classes in this way, to hopefully better serve students, and maybe an opportunity to bring back students that we've lost or bring in new students. We've had a lot of enrollment decline in recent years, and so we're hoping that this is just kind of a new idea to maybe bring students back or make things easier for students. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with some of the kind of questions or statements that we were thinking of in the beginning. Have you ever heard any of the following? So in reference to community college students, our students can't complete in 4 years because they have to attend part-time. Or students at our colleges have to work, so it's not fair to measure our success based on 2 or 4 year completion rate. Or our students choose to attend part-time so that they can fill in the blank with explore, work, take care of family. So these are kind of statements about community college students, which may be true, but we kind of wanted to dig deeper into these statements and kind of ask why, or ask, you know, in looking at the first one, our students can't complete in 4 years because they have to attend part-time. Why do they have to attend part-time? And is there anything that we can do to assist them and maybe help so that they could attend full-time or could attend more than they're attending now? Next slide, please. And so this is another quote from a student at the focus group. It's a little bit all over the place, but I'll try and read it, but I'm sure you can get kind of the general gist of it. It says, they know what classes we have to take. They're the ones who made it, referring to the degree track. Why can't they just schedule them so that they should be stacked in a 2-year plan? You say, hey, if you follow this plan, we'll make sure that you get the classes and you'll be done in 2 years. I think that's completely reasonable, and yet it's like one hand doesn't talk to the other. So they were talking about us, I guess, all of us on this meeting, and the way that courses are scheduled. And it's, you know, we know what classes students have to take for certain degrees, but why don't we kind of coordinate so that they're sequenced and make it easier for students to take those classes on the list to get that degree? Next slide, please. So these are the questions we kind of started with when we started this work. So first is, how do we help more part-time students attend full-time? Looking at what are the barriers to these students attending full-time? Are there actions that we can take that would, maybe at the state level or at the college level, that could enable more of these students to attend full-time? Really understanding why they're attending part-time. Next is, how do we create the conditions for designing courses that are flexible and adaptive to students' time constraints? How can we make things easier for this, like for the colleges and faculty to design these types of courses, or to convert existing courses to this shorter term schedule? And then next, are Ed Code and Title V the reason that we don't offer more flexible schedules? So are there sections or requirements or rules in education and Title V that prohibit colleges from offering courses in this way, or that disincentivize colleges from offering courses this way, either on the fiscal side or on the academic side? For example, are there requirements that if a college wants to shorten a course from a semester length course to a short-term course, does that college then have to go through the whole curriculum committee process again? Like, is there rules in Title V that make it harder for colleges to schedule courses in a more flexible way? And then same on the attendance accounting side, if a college shortens a course, are they going to generate less FTS, and is there kind of a disincentive funding wise there? And then what options do colleges have if they want to transition to short-term courses? What are the steps they need to take? What's the Chancellor's office role? How can we support colleges in this work? Next slide, please. So then we looked at kind of what are the advantages to shorter courses and academic terms. So students generally receive the same number of credits when a course is completed in 8 or 10 weeks. When we talk about these short-term courses, we're talking about like a 3-unit course is a 3-unit course, regardless of whether it's a semester length course or an 8-week or a 10-week course. The way we're thinking of it is that 3-unit courses or semester length courses would be converted into these shorter term lengths and then kind of stacked so that students could take them in order. We're not thinking that a 3-unit course would be broken like in half into 2, 1.5 unit courses. We really are thinking of 3-unit courses kind of being compressed into shorter time frames so that students can take less courses at a time and kind of complete maybe 4 courses within a term, but they do 2 and then 2 so that they can maybe get more units done. Next, some students may be able to complete more courses each semester than would be possible in a traditional 17-week schedule, which can lead to students earning their degrees faster. So a lot of the research finds that when courses are these 8-week or 10-week, these kind of shorter courses, it's easier sometimes for working students to complete 2 kind of compressed courses and then another 2 compressed courses than it is to complete 4 semester length courses that last through the entire term. And then the structure allows students to take fewer classes each session rather than 4 to 5 classes at the same time, providing students the ability to focus on fewer subjects at a time. So that's kind of the same thing students have, even though these compressed courses do require more work of the student because they're the same course material in 8 weeks. The student's only focusing on like 2 courses at a time rather than trying to juggle, I guess, all 4 or 5 courses throughout the entire semester. They also provide greater flexibility so that students don't have to wait the entire semester. If something comes up or something at work or family and they end up dropping a course or 2, they're not waiting until the full next semester to kind of get back into it. Next slide, please. Also, part-time students can take more courses. So looking at like financial aid side, sometimes when these courses are scheduled in this way where they're kind of these sequenced 8-week courses rather than being like a full semester length, part-time students can take more courses within that semester and be considered full-time for financial aid benefits. For students that have more responsibilities that they're juggling at the same time, focusing on 2 classes can kind of be a little bit easier than trying to balance 4 different classes at the same time. So these 2 benefits, greater flexibility and also the ability to be considered full-time for financial aid, can kind of help students stay on track. Sometimes students just need like a little incentive, a little something to make things seem like less impossible and seem like they can actually do this. And sometimes this is a way, especially with the financial aid, to kind of give that little incentive or that little possibility to students. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the percentage, looking at total courses, the percentage of total courses that are identified as being short-term based on Chancellor's Office MIS data. You can see looking back to fall 2017, over the next few terms, that percentage was steadily increasing up until spring of 2020. It kind of went down, and that's likely due to the pandemic and everything going online. Maybe these short-term courses, it was a little bit harder to transition them to online. And so that percentage went down a little bit, but then since then we've seen it start to creep back up again. So we can see there's definitely an interest in these short-term courses, and there is kind of an upward trend. Over the last few years, colleges are offering more of them. So that's a good thing. Next slide, please. And then looking at the attendance accounting. So Each course uses one attendance counting procedure. So it's either weekly census, daily census, positive attendance, or the alternative attendance counting procedure. And the procedure used is based on attributes of the course. So whether it's credit or non-credit, whether it's semester length, whether it's in person or online. Under Title V rules, short-term credit courses would use either daily census or positive attendance. Next slide, please. Daily census is probably going to be the most common one used for these short-term courses, and this is used for regularly scheduled short-term courses. So for a short-term course that meets for the same number of hours on each meeting day. I think one kind of misconception, and the one thing that I thought as well when we started this work, is that a daily census course is going to generate less FTS than a weekly census course. And I completely believed that when we started this work, and I thought that that was the reason that colleges didn't offer a lot of short-term courses. But when I worked with some colleges and looked at the actual like scheduling patterns and the way that colleges schedule these courses from the beginning, they use those total hours in the course outline of record and then look at the total number of meeting days. And then they kind of back into the length of the course or the length of each meeting session. And so if colleges are kind of maximizing that meeting session length and not under scheduling, we found that these short-term courses actually can generate a little bit more FTS than the same course offered as a semester length course. So that was very surprising to me. And I think that we are still working on kind of providing more details on that to help colleges and make sure that they're aware of kind of how to schedule these courses so that they can maximize FTS. Next slide, please. So these are kind of our next steps. So we just kind of started this project over the last few months, and we've really been doing this work and working with colleges and trying to understand both the fiscal side and the academic side. In the next few months, the first step, we have clarify options that exist for districts to offer shorter term program pathways. We do have some guidance that we're working on that'll delve a little bit deeper into the attendance accounting, give some examples of scheduling, and then also the course approval. And then next steps, explore and research necessary regulatory changes. We're still looking at the regulations and trying to understand and get a better idea of if there are opportunities that we could make changes within the regulations that would make things easier for the colleges to offer these types of courses or incentivize these types of courses, or whether there's anything in the regulations right now that is kind of getting in the way or making it harder for colleges. So we're still going to be doing that work over the next few months. And then also leverage resources and research such as Achieving the Dream to support districts interested in creating 8-week term pathways. We do have a number of colleges who have started this work already. We also have a couple colleges that have reached out to us recently with questions about kind of scheduling courses in this way, these 8-week sequenced courses that lead to a degree or a certificate. So we do want to make sure that we're supporting them as they kind of move and do this work, and hopefully we can kind of duplicate or use work that colleges do to help other colleges and use it as an example. Next slide, please. I'm going to pass it back to Lizette.
Thank you. Before we highlight some of the research that Achieving the Dream has conducted at colleges throughout the country that have transitioned to offering more courses through this modality or through this sequence, I wanted to highlight some of the great interactions and questions that we've gotten over chat and then the Q&A. So one was, what role does financial aid play in enabling more of our students to attend full time? And I think completely agree that continues to be a major role. We can do a lot through course scheduling, through internal policies and practices, but the overall support that our students receive through Cal grants, Pell grants, fee waivers. Those are all still critical in helping address that unmet need that exists. Again, that means that students have to work in order to balance school and necessities. And so that's an important piece. Where that is important for us is also thinking about how we package supports, financial aid, and other services to students right when they start, so that they don't have to navigate complex bureaucracies to find that financial aid, supports, aid, grants, waivers that they could benefit from, that addresses, again, that need that many of our students have. We have some structural work to do. We're excited to see a Cal Grant reform bill that actually moved through the first policy committee yesterday. That can be a big help. And then the other one is lots of questions around, what does this mean? It's not a silver bullet. None of these are a silver bullet. They're all elements that for us to talk about, research locally, engage. And from our perspective at the state chancellor's office, it's ensuring that there aren't any barriers that are in the way for colleges that want to provide this as another tool in their tool chest for engaging working learners. And we know that some of them some colleges and districts are exploring, probably in many early stages, just like we are. What does this mean? What are the steps? Do we transition all of it? And it may not work for everything, but if you as districts and colleges want to explore it, we want to be helpful partners, again, by doing some of that internal research that Director Natalie Wagner highlighted. Is what does Title V do? What does it enable? What barriers exist in that? And how do we address them so that you have the local flexibility, the local options to adapt to your schedules? Another point that I want to elevate and highlight is that many are saying, I heard another comment of our students may not want to attend but full-time, but they want to complete in a timely manner. And so it's thinking about the sequencing, not necessarily forcing them to take additional classes, but how do we help maximize all the terms that are options to offer on our campuses so that students can complete in a timely manner or move on to their next educational step, and have it fit with their schedules. So those are all, again, important conversations that I highly encourage and that I hope are provocative enough to take back to your campus. Maybe have conversations of, is this something that we'd be interested in? What do we need? What barriers exist? What questions do we still have? And so those are some of the key pieces I want to highlight. And there was one question in there that I want to elevate for Natalie around what's the difference between a term, a quarter term, and this approach.
With just typing an answer. Quarters are generally 12 weeks, I think. And so we're talking about a little bit even shorter than that. We're talking about kind of 8 to 10 week courses, and focusing on the colleges that have a semester of 16 to 18 weeks, and that hopefully they could get 2 of those 8-week courses kind of sequenced within that one primary term. But that's true that quarters are a shorter term also in our, I don't know if they see, more success in those, getting through those quarter length colleges, but we're talking about even shorter than quarters and kind of fitting them, maybe keeping your primary term the same length that it is now, but fitting these short-term courses kind of within the primary term.
Thank you.
Sure.
With that, I want to highlight a resource that is available to districts and colleges that want to learn more. We didn't go into comprehensive detail here in the webinar. But we hope we've piqued your interest to explore more about what could this look like. And it's not an exploration that you have to do alone. We know that many colleges across the country have delved into this work, have monitored data to analyze what does it mean, what are outcomes, are there disproportionate impact, all important questions that are important to have. And so the tool that I just posted on there is one that was created by Achieving the Dream. And this tool has 5 phases. One around decision making, some of the very questions that you're asking. Is this right for us? Is it something, who benefits, what needs to happen? Talks about some of the case making, and then the strategy and academic planning. This, as you know, is important work that happens with faculty and support from faculty. But what additional support planning is needed? And as each district and college engages in these activities, there are sections that really highlight some key decisions that need to be made, that highlight required stakeholders that need to be in the room to explore these options and paths, some important data and questions that need to be, data that needs to be collected, and questions that need to be asked. Communication and planning, what does it look like? What can we learn from those that have gone down this path? What required training and professional development, and some critical next steps. So encourage folks to look at this tool, engage with it, and see if this is something that is of interest. And as Natalie shared, we will be putting out a memo that highlights what is possible within the current language of Title V and Ed Code for those that are exploring this as one of many options and tools to support students that are working adults, need adaptive schedules. With that, I'm going to see if there are any other additional questions and then wrap us up. Any other questions you want to elevate, Natalie?
I feel like there are a lot that require more time than we have. Feel free to reach out to us via email too.
Great. Thank you. With that, I want to encourage us, challenge us, provoke us to think about how do we use our schedules and strategic enrollment. How do we think about receptivity of the very students that we're trying to outreach to? How do we do all of that with the end goal in mind? And that end goal for students being, how do we help them get to a journey of success? And challenge ourselves to recognize the needs of our students, that that necessity for work, the complexity of their schedules and their lives. Think about supporting them not just at the initial enrollment phase of their interactions, but intentional connection to other supports, aid, services that help them along the way. And then creating and designing pathways, schedules that fit with the new majority that we are serving, those working learners, again, of over 61% of our students that are telling us that balancing school and work is one of their primary obstacles to success. We know this work isn't easy. On our side, we're just beginning that exploration, looking at how do we help districts in this journey. How do we provide policy changes that can help you accomplish this work? So with that, really want to thank the great engagement throughout this webinar. Appreciate you joining us. And I want to encourage you to keep joining in this series as we think about an equitable recovery and challenge ourselves to explore new ways, learn lessons from the pandemic that could help us recover with equity. The next webinar is May 18th from 1 to 2 p.m. So don't miss it. Look out for email reminders. And with that, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.